In this lesson, we'll be learning how to work with percents. And some of the problems we need to work with are figuring out percent of a number type problems. And for these types of problems, there's really two different ways you can solve them. You can solve them using a proportion. You can set up the problem as a proportion where you're looking at the part of the number over the whole equal to the percent over 100, or you can set it up as a simple math equation and solve for the unknown value. So setting it up as a proportion, when it asks what number is 25% of 64, well, right away you know that the percent 25 goes in over that 100. So over 100, and then part of the whole. So what number is 25% of 64? This is the whole number that we're looking at. So that's going to go in our denominator. And our unknown value is the part of that, the 25% number. So we're going to put x in there. Now this is just a simple proportion, so you can actually cross multiply to solve. And so cross multiplying 64 times 25 and x times 100 gets us 100x equal to 64 times 25, which is 1600. And then you divide by 100 to find x. So x is, in this case, equal to 16. So one way to check too, if you do 16 and divide by 64, because now this is a proportion, meaning this fraction here, this fraction is equal to this fraction. So 25 divided by 100 is 0.25. 16 divided by 64 should also equal 0.25. So if we check 16 divided by 64, it does equal 0.25. So proportion just means you have two ratios set equal to each other. The other method for solving, you can set it up as a simple equation by translating what's here into a math equation. So since it's saying what number, this piece right here is our x. Is in math means equals. And 25%, when you're working with percents, you want to use them as decimals. So 0.25 of in math means to times, and 64 obviously is just 64. So now we have an equation, x equals 0.25 times 64. And if you actually multiply that through 0.25 times 64, it does equal 16. So there's two different ways you can solve these problems. Setting it up as a proportion and cross multiplying, or translate it as a math equation by replacing is with equals, of with times, and then dividing and solving to find x. Okay, so let's look at another example. This time we have what percent of 32 is 40. So setting it up with our proportion equation, the part over the whole, you'll notice I have these little words, is and of, next to it. That's just to help you know which number should go where. So in this problem, we're solving for percent. What percent of 32 is 40? So the percent, that's our unknown value. So that's going to go in for the percent here, our x over 100. Now, when you're setting up your proportion for your ratio for the other side, it's not always going to be the smaller number over the larger number. This is saying what percent of 32 is 40. So the whole that we're looking at is actually 32, and we're trying to find out what percent of it is 40. 40 is larger than 32, so you can expect the percent to be larger than 100 because 40 is a larger number. So keep in mind this is over of. The is number was 40, is 40, so that was in our numerator. The of number was 32, so I put that in my denominator. So think of it as is over of, so you know which number goes where. It's just a little tip to help you. And then cross multiplying, 40 times 100 is 4,000. And then 32 times x is 32x. And then if we divide both sides by 32, you end up with 125. X is equal to 125. So it's 125% of 32. And that makes sense because 40 is a larger number than 32. So 40 is 125% of 32. And again, if you check your answer, 40 divided by 32 is 1.25. And as a percent, 125 divided by 100 is also 1.25. So remember, with percents, you multiply by 100 to move that decimal. And then as an equation, when you're setting it up that way, what percent? So x, and I'm just going to put a little percent sign with it, x percent of 32. So of in math means a times. So times 32 is 40, so equals 40. So what percent times 32, equals 40. So we're trying to solve for x. X right now is multiplied by 32. So if we divide by 32 on both sides, you end up with x equaling, and it should be 1.25, but I'm just going to double check. So I got 1.25. So it's 1.25 as a decimal, but remember with percents, x percent, I need to times this by 100 to make it a percent out of 100. So x is equal to 125%. So that's the tricky piece with solving as an equation. It's not automatically going to give you the percent. You have to translate it into a percent by multiplying by 100. Okay, let's look at one last example. This time it's 42 is 40% of what number? So again, as a proportion, 42 is, so 42 is 40%. 40%, percents always go over 100. So 40 over 100, and what number is that? So what is our x? And now when we cross multiply, 40 times x, we have 40x. 42 times 100, we have 4,200. Dividing both sides by 40, we end up with 105 as our value. And just to check to see if that makes sense, if we divide 42 divided by 105, so putting 105 in for x, so 42 divided by 105, we get 0.4. Checking over here, 40 divided by 100, we also got 0.4. So this one checked out. As an equation, translating to an equation, simply writing it 42 is 40%, so 0.4 times x. So translating each of those words, is equals, change your percent to a decimal, and of means to multiply. So now you can see for both of those, both sides of the equation, you're actually dividing by 0.4 to solve. So, whoops, shouldn't be a 9. So if we divide by 0.4 on both sides, you end up with x equaling 105 again.